It is the Brazen and Reckless Oni type that debuted as an Ori Meta Contest winner in Medachange 8. It is KMN00 Kimengar, with a kit of Reckless, Break Hammer, Claw, Biped legs, and the Bloodstain leg ability. Now, it is nice to see Kimengar officially be launched as a gacha-based model, as we have seen him in the past, usually as an enemy NPC in story mode, or as an occasional enemy NPC in events every once in a while, usually paired off with Sarahime as the other resident Oni in the game currently. But as mentioned, it is very nice to see another model, especially an Ori Meta winner no less, make their official debut as a pullable model in Medachange S. Reckless is a support-based skill that is relatively new, as we have not really seen it a lot of times previous. But what it does is that it will add an AoE effect to the next turn of a melee-based skill, and it will also buff the damage of that next turn by up to 15%. So right off the bat, this is something that Kimengar can make use of by himself or use use on someone else relatively easily and pretty sufficiently, especially either on himself as a dominant melee fighter, or for someone else on the team that maybe takes the role of the melee nuker instead. Say for instance, Omega Knight or Tyrell Beetle, or someone who focuses and capitalizes primarily on raw melee damage. Break Hammer, of course, is an open addition and very openly welcomed on any team, as it is a gravity-based attribute skill. That does mean that it does include a passive heavy punish, so anyone that is using 2 or more heavy parts will be subject to a very painful lesson and a reminder to be very careful who you do face. Naturally, 2 or more is the best requirement and desired bonus if you do want to make sure that hit does count. And then his left arm of Claw is a standard melee attack that is a scattered AoE, meaning that it will damage 1 part normally and then 2 parts at random at 1/3 additional damage. The Bloodstain ability that his legs do pack by themselves is also a very open addition that can definitely make his already relatively balanced melee kit hit even harder with that buff to power every time he breaks something. And if you do pair that with, say, Break Hammer and then Claw or reverse, he can definitely capitalize this very easily just by himself alone, and go from basically your balanced melee punisher and fighter to maybe even a more dedicated melee nuker once he does get that success bonus going on Break Hammer. As a pure set score across the board, he is honestly very tanky overall, which does work greatly in his favor. Over 5,000 HP for that head alone, almost 4,000 HP per arm, and about 3,600 for his legs, so that means Kimengar can absolutely take a hit and keep on trucking, which does definitely tie true into his motive as an Oni Gargoyle type. And then on his legs, a mobility of 817 is in that upper sweet spot you definitely want to be at for legs. Not faster than fast like, say, Manjiro or Cross Messiah Z or someone similar to that, but definitely above 800 is where you want to sit on that. A melee resist of 1311 means he can tank and work in close combat pretty efficiently without taking too many hits. Shoot resist of 861 definitely is a little squishy than what would be desired, but he can make up for it relatively easily as long as it's not someone that focuses on raw damage. And evade of 975 isn't too bad either. Probably would rather focus on either grazing attacks or maybe hitting back harder than actually dodging them outright, but that's just something that a brazen Oni type like Kimengar does focus on. Kimengar is also capable of Medachange, where he changes into a more gargoyle-like form akin to his motif, and in that form he changes his kit almost entirely for Drive A of Charge Buster, Drive B of Provoke, Drive C of Metaphor Seal, his leg type changing to Float, and the leg ability changing to Acrobatics, which passively buffs his evade stat higher than what even is listed here. Now, definitely a change up compared to what he had before of a support and 2 melee, converting to a shooting and 2 melees instead. Basically converting to more of a conventional interrupter than an actual nuker, whether one way or the other. But this is honestly where a lot of that extra HP ties in. Again, nearly over 5,000 for the head, 3,600 per arm, and so forth, tying into an impressive 16,546 for total armor across the board. And look at those stats too on his overall mobility. A rank, of course, on all terrains because he's a float-based leg, 1096 and 1185 for your melee, and shoot resist means that he can definitely tank a hit and keep on trucking. An evade of 1318 is absolutely fantastic even before the acrobatics bonus that you're granted on the field, and a mobility of 943, which is even better, which means he actually goes faster in this form than in biped form, but that does tie into his kit very well. Charge Buster is a standard shooting attack that draws bonus damage from your Metaforce charge and then consumes a small amount of it upon use. So naturally with this, it means that the higher your Metaforce charge is, the higher of a bonus you get. But the nice thing to pay attention to on this is that Kimengar's Drive A also does not require charge itself to maintain, which does actually mean that you can use Kimengar in either form almost immediately right from turn 1 without having to actually change forms or actually build up a Metaforce charge even before it being allowed to change. Drive B, Provoke, is simply a melee-inducing skill that we have seen, kind of a half ailment more or less, that we've seen on another popular bot, Medachange, the fighting beta fish. Simply what it does is that upon attacking a target, it forces them into an enraged state, which means that they can only target the attacker and no one else until the attacker officially does fall on the field, of which then they are officially calmed down. Naturally, of course, you can also remove this with Stat Cleanse, so do be wary of this, of course, if you do plan to capitalize on that Provoke skill. Drive C of Metaforce Seal, definitely some pretty solid power across the board for that too, even for an ailment-based attack. What it does is simply prevent the opponent from being able to unleash a Metaforce, which can definitely come in handy to prevent you from a surprise nuke from left field that will punish you and turn the tides where you least expect it. Across the board, I do honestly have to rate Kimengar a pretty solid 8.5 out of 10 for a pure set score. He does cover a lot of pretty glaring weaknesses he may have pretty solidly between his robot mode and his Medachange mode pretty efficiently without any major drawback. And then, of course, the stats on top of that do speak for themselves for some pretty solid base power and success across the board. Nothing really slowing him down either with his heat or cool, and really solid leg stats in addition. As mixed parts, I would have to rate him just a hair lower, actually, at an 8 out of 10, but still good. But if you use him as mixed parts, you're kind of missing out on a lot of bonuses that you'd be getting in comparison to using Kimengar as a pure set, such as, say, the Charge Buster, the Provoke, and the Metaforce Seal, or the really high Evade with the Acrobatics and the 13-18 on top of that. So whether you use Kimengar as a pure set or as mixed parts, say for the heavy punish with his right arm, or conventional melee with his left, or even to use Reckless for your dedicated melee teams, Kimengar definitely will provide a lot of buffs to a team, especially more melee-oriented, to help kind of round out any edges that you might be looking for that are left a little unrefined before him.